Well, good afternoon. My name is Joe Fournier, and I am the founding member of Fournier Legal Services, a law firm focused on business law and estate planning. We are based in Connecticut, licensed in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Pennsylvania. With me today is Patrick Hartwig of the Hartwig Law Firm based in Plymouth, Mass. And I have invited him to join us on our quarterly webinar series. I'd like to take an opportunity to briefly introduce you to our most active and fastest growing area of practice, our attorney transitions practice. We enjoy working with transitioning attorneys in part because it combines business law and succession planning, and it also utilizes our team's collective experiences working in many different legal environments historically. The attorney transitions practice is generally focused on attorneys that want to either grow or exit. Either they want to grow their practice by looking for opportunities to merge with or join another firm, or they want to exit the practice of law by looking for opportunities to sell their practice or by winding down in an of counsel role with another firm. If you are an attorney, then you went to law school, but you may not have gone to business school. You may be missing out on the value of the growth opportunities that exist in the legal market, or on opportunities to capitalize on the value that you have created throughout your career. So now I'd like to introduce you to Patrick Hartwig. I've known Patrick since 2012 when he was working for a different law firm. He is an excellent attorney with an outstanding reputation. Patrick opened his own firm, the Hartwig Law Firm, in Southern Massachusetts in 2014. And his practice has grown steadily over the past 9 years. So Patrick, thank you again for joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your practice?
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me. I have a small Social Security disability law practice. That's my primary focus, and for many years it was my only focus. We're based in Massachusetts, and we've now grown to a point where we represent clients throughout all of New England. Because it's a federal administrative law practice, it's relatively easy to expand geographically. And so we've done that. I have about 10 full-time employees and a few part-time employees. And we are doing our best to expand not only our geographic footprint, but we're trying to expand the types of cases that we take in or refer out. And that's about it in a nutshell.
That's great. Thanks. Now, in 2021, you expanded your practice by purchasing another law firm, the Keefe Disability Law Firm, which is located in the Boston metro area. Thanks to you, we represented you in this transaction, Fournier Legal Services. Why did you decide to purchase another law firm?
Great question. I had opened my practice in 2014, and although I was growing steadily every year, I was finding it difficult to grow at a pace that I was really striving for. And I thought, and I think it's true, that one of the fastest ways to grow is to simply acquire another firm that does something very similar. And an opportunity like that came up, and it's really helpful in a lot of ways, because growing incrementally by increasing your marketing or finding different methods is very challenging. But when you can grow your practice overnight with a transaction like that, you gain a big portion of the market share that I was also hunting for all these years. And that's a big bonus right away.
You're growing for me, exponentially instead of linearly, right?
Exactly, because the slow linear growth, although it was great, it just wasn't what I had really wanted. And so the other part about it that I found very attractive is that there were certain limitations in my own practice or weaknesses. And one of that was, in my instance, was my online presence and my website traffic and my organic growth from online leads. And the target that I went after, that firm, that just so happened to be its bread and butter. And so in that way, it was a nice way to combine the different types of skills and qualities that my firm had with another firm that kind of made up for some of my weaknesses. That was a big help. The other reason is, growing incrementally, in your own practice, it inevitably will take on more and more expenses. And in some ways, buying a practice, you can eventually and relatively quickly find ways to reduce costs, because you don't need 2 offices, or you don't need 2 of everything anymore. And so a lot of those expenses that the target firm has evaporate very quickly. And so you can really reduce the costs while gaining a big portion of the market and quite a few clients. And then finally, I think for me, what was always daunting about the idea of purchasing a firm, it seems like it's impossible when you first think about it. But what you find out in the end is it doesn't necessarily require any money up front. And in fact, in my case, I was very lucky to have built my practice up through those first 7 years without any debt at all. And, by taking on some debt in the transaction without providing any cash up front, it wasn't as big of a risk as you might think. I was in a really good position to do that, and I could complete the transaction without really changing anything about my financial situation. And I found that to be very appealing.
Sure, that's great. That's great. It's great that you're able to build your practice over those years without taking on debt, by the way. And you can call yourself lucky. I think sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, but I think you have a little bit of both going on. I'm sure you did a great job. So
thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you. That all makes sense to me. Why did you decide to work with us? And again, thank you for hiring us to work on the transaction. Why did you decide to work with Fournier Legal Services?
Well, for me, it was a very simple decision, and you came to my mind immediately because we had met years and years earlier. And not only are you just very personable and very, very smart, you have a background that is in many ways unique in the legal field. And that is, with your background in accounting, lawyers famously are just not good business people. And I don't have any background in business. Everything I've learned by doing it myself through trial and error. And I knew that a transaction like this, not only analyzing the possibility of it, but then going through with it, I would need to have someone on my team who was an expert in all of the numbers, not just the numbers themselves, but thinking through everything through the lens of a business, not just a law practice. And so it was very simple for me to contact you right away, because I knew that you had a background not just in accounting and running your own firm, but in your past, you had been someone who was helping law firm owners manage their operations. Not just how things work, but the finances behind it. And that was not only an easy decision, but it ended up being a fantastic decision, because that transaction, it basically, even though it only happens on one day, the lead up to it was 6+ months.
Right.
And there's so much that goes into it. And to have you and Sally and your whole team at that time was invaluable for me, because it kept me even keeled. And I felt assured at just about every point along the way when I could have been discouraged or panicked even. And
well, I appreciate that.
That made it fantastic.
Yeah, good. It's funny you say that about the numbers, and I wasn't really thinking of it from that angle, but it is true. The 6-month ramp up, I think the first interactions we had on this particular deal were you sending me a bunch of Excel spreadsheets, right? And saying,
yeah,
can I even do this, right? So I did forget about that angle, but yes, thanks for pointing that out. Now, one of the barriers I've faced with this practice is lawyers are my clients. Lawyers, they don't need me, right? They don't need a law firm. So why, or at least that's what they think initially. So Patrick, did you ever consider doing this without hiring an attorney? And if so, how did you kind of navigate that decision process?
I really didn't even consider not calling you. I know what you mean by, attorneys, they've done contracts, they can read through contracts, they can sort of spot all of the issues. But the thing that's really important here is, especially if you've never done this before, this isn't a regular transaction, and the implications are huge. And there's a lot of emotion that goes into it on both sides. And when you think about that, and to me, that all hit me very quickly, just in thinking about the possibility of buying another firm, that within 30 minutes of thinking through it, I said, there's no way I want to do this without some real counsel, for all of those reasons. And so for me, it was an easy decision. Another thing that came up specific to my transaction was I had a long, very wonderful relationship with the principal of the target firm, and he was my mentor. And so I knew instantly when the possibility came up that I wanted to maintain that relationship. And in many ways, having a third party on board who you can trust, who's very even keeled, that can help kind of keep that relationship stable. Because a lot of times different emotional and personal issues pop up. And if you might not remember it, but in fact, they did in those 6 months.
Yep, right.
And mostly on the seller side, it was his firm. He had built it from scratch, and he was getting up there in age, and there was a lot of attachment there, and a lot of, I wouldn't say ego, but a lot of pride. And you were an incredible source for me of just reassuring me through the process and making sure that I made sound decisions at each step along the way, and didn't really let some of those personal issues, which could impact my thinking and decision making, get the best of me. And so I really do believe that it's an easy decision in the end to rely on the experience of a third party who really knows what they're doing. Just because you're a lawyer doesn't mean you can do this by yourself.
Sure.
I think it's an easy decision.
Yeah, no, it's great. No, there were some times where the deal actually changed some of the details, not really the structure, but some of the details changed throughout the process. And I do agree with you in particular with that point, that it was probably a lot easier for you to be able to go through your counsel for that.
Absolutely.
Now you did take on employees, correct? How many employees did you take from the other firm?
So the firm's principal, as part of the transaction, and for lots of other reasons, ethical reasons related to the existing clients, and practical transition issues, he has stayed on board. And the plan for him is to be on board basically a total of 2 years on a very limited part-time basis. In addition to that, I have kept his 2 primary paralegals and one of his intake and marketing folks. By the time I came along to purchase the practice, it wasn't quite as large as it had been. And in many ways, that was good for me because it made the staffing issues that came with it smaller and less of a big deal than I anticipated.
Sure. Okay,
so for me, the last thing I would say about that, for me, when it, I knew that I wanted to make that culture more like my culture that I built here. And by taking on fewer potential employees, that's made that transition easier as well.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, great. So we look back, it's been, I don't know, maybe 18-ish months or so since we closed on the deal. And how has the purchase and transition been working out for you in the Hartwig Law Firm so far?
Yep. I say the biggest thing right off the bat is that the target firm's website and its organic incoming leads from online traffic period has absolutely paid off, because that, like I said earlier, that was one of my large weaknesses. And it just so happens that in the last year, for different reasons, some of my other lead sources have either dried up or have gone through their own difficult transitions and have slowed down. And so in many ways, having that more diverse set of incoming lead sources has been a godsend, number one. The other thing I would tell you is that, all of these transition issues take time. And the thing that's been really promising is that we have been very successful in trimming the overhead, especially the overhead associated with the target firm that we purchased. And so it makes you encouraged to see the overall overhead shrink, just like you had planned. And we had talked about leading up to the transaction and all of our discussions about the purchase price and the way to structure it, and all of your background in projections, and doing that in a way for me that gave me such confidence that, oh yeah, this can be done. And see, look at Joe, look what Joe just came up with. And see, you will see in 12 months, these are the overhead costs that you will be able to eliminate entirely. And these are the ones you're going to be able to reduce significantly. And all of that's come to fruition. And that's been very encouraging as well.
Great, great. And do you, given the experience, I know it's only been a year and a half, but do you have any other comments or advice for lawyers who are looking to expand their practice?
For me, because it seemed like a daunting process at first, as lawyers, you're always trained to think about the worst case scenarios or ethical issues that pop up. And that all turned out to be much smoother and easier than I ever anticipated. You cover your basic bases with, client notification or the trust account issues. And it's been much smoother than I ever would have imagined, especially with maintaining the existing client base for the target firm, and all the transitions from not just an ethical standpoint, from a practical working relationship standpoint. There have been almost no hiccups at all.
Great.
And what I would say to folks who might be in my position considering this down the road is, don't let your nerves get the best of you when you're thinking about, how difficult this could be from an ethical standpoint, or along those lines, because it's not nearly as big of an issue as you think if you do everything the right way.
And obviously I have a lot more experience too, since we worked together, right, over the last year and a half or so of doing these. And you bring up a really good point. That is a common fear of the acquirer, is navigating the issues related to the client notice. Are the clients going to come with me because they don't have to, as you know? So that's good actually to hear that you really, it sounds like it's pretty seamless for you, which is great.
Seamless. Yep. So that has been another reason why, I think if there were folks in my position who are considering the possibility, it's another reason why my advice would be to be aggressive. Go for it.
Sure.
Because the opportunity to grow exponentially overnight just does not come by very often. And it's not as big of a hurdle to get through the transaction, and then the transition is something that you can handle, especially if you have someone like Joe on your side who helps you get through that process and helps you foresee some of the issues that you will face in that first year after the transaction. So nothing comes at you that's too big of a surprise, and it's not something that you can't then handle.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, listen, I appreciate you taking the time. I think other than calling me smart earlier, which maybe damaged your credibility a tiny bit, I've enjoyed talking with you, and I appreciate that your willingness to participate. I know you're a busy man. You have a growing practice. You have a growing family, and I just want to thank you again for choosing to spend a few minutes with us. Very helpful, and hopefully we can continue to work together as you iron out any remaining transition issues.
That's great. That sounds great, and thanks for everything, Joe. I appreciate it.
All right, you got it, Patrick. We'll be in touch.
Sounds good. Thank you.